Salam and Ramadan Mubarak. Welcome back to our Dispatch Weekly program where we discuss Somalia's latest news. This week, we're talking about the devastating fire in the Hargeisa market, the certification issues in Somalia's electoral process, and the Somali federal government releasing frozen funds meant to Somaliland's developmental projects. To discuss these and other issues, we're joined by Quays Irbey and Abdirizak Ahmed, both Horn of Africa political analysts. I began our conversation by asking Quays if he could give us his reaction to the Hargeisa fires this week.
It's absolutely a sad news and what we call a disaster. Somalia has already a fragile economy. Every side of the country, if you look at Somaliland, Puntland, or Somalia in general, and then yet again, the second largest market in Somalia to have a disaster like this will cause an economic collapse in Somaliland and in Somalia as a whole. We know that Somaliland has two sources of income that mainly generates work or employment or any sort of income for the population in that sort of region. One is the Berbera port, and the second is that largest market that has been banned to the ground a few nights ago. So it's a sad news. However, there's other contributing factors that now will be looked at deeply, which is including the pollution that it can cause environmentally, the long-term issues that are going to be ineffective as a result of that, and the mothers and also all the people who does not have a stable job, who used to generate some sort of income from that market, are going to suffer. So it's a sad news.
Right. Abdirizak Ahmed, thank you for joining us again this week on Dispatches. Similarly, same question, but if you can weigh in on the contributing factors to the disaster and what we learned from that.
Thank you, Ramadan Mubarak, to all of you. Thank you, Somali Dispatch, Abdirizak, and my brother. First and foremost, I would have to, share my sympathy with the people of Hargeisa for the pain they have gone through. But also, this should be a lesson learned. What have happened in Hargeisa market could happen anywhere else in Somalia. Millions of dollars. It's now estimated to be about $1.2 to $2 billion worth of money run in that market. But again, it has also shown that it's very unfortunate 30 years after Somaliland declared themselves as an independent, that the capital city Hargeisa had only 3 firefighter trucks. And I here wanted also to thank their regional government of Somali state of Ethiopia, who really came in time, and without their help, lives might have been lost. So now we are very grateful, thanks to Allah, that there were no lives lost. But again, the magnitude of this fire would have really engulfed not only the Hargeisa market, but the whole city, if the Somali state and the Somaliland and the Somalis in general have not came in together. So again, we really pray for them. As we speak right now, I just came out of a meeting whereby we had the Somali business community here in Columbus, Ohio, who are trying at least to get into ways that they can help folks that have lost, their resources and all they had. So again, this is, it's a disaster. Unfortunately, that had happened to Somaliland, but I do believe that all the Somalis would come in, and these are the times that the Somalis show unity whenever one of us has problems. So we wish them well. We wish them that may Allah give them, a good recovery on this.
Right. The money, if I may stay with you, Abdirizak, the money that the federal government has donated at least partially, the 12 million initially donated to Somaliland's aid was meant and was apparently frozen before. It was money donated by the international community that went through the federal government of Somalia, but was frozen. It comes to light now that the federal government is releasing those funds. Do you care to weigh in on that situation?
Yeah. Number one thing I literally wanted also to share with the rest of the Somali audience is now with the $11+ million that the Prime Minister have said that it would be released to Somaliland have shown few things. Number one, it has shown that this current government led by Farmajo is the least corrupted government Somalia had in recent. And the reason I'm saying this, it was back in 2018, there was about more than $9.6 million that was confiscated from United Arab Emirates, is smuggling into Somalia. And then 5 years later, that money still sits in Central Bank of Somalia. Now today, we find it out that over $11-12 million that were meant to go to Somaliland for development projects are also sitting in Somalia Central Bank. So which literally shows, this funds or this money could have been corrupted and used for other means, whereby the previous governments literally left office while salaries were not paid for more than a year or so. So number one. Then coming back to your question, it was back in 2019, 2020 that the Somali government, the current Somali government, has revoked, what we would call a special agreement between Somaliland and the international donors. The Somali government at that time have said that they would want all the funds coming to Somalia go through the Somali channel, through the federal government of Somalia. So Somaliland then refused and said, we will not allow the international community to pass whatever funds it's going to Somaliland to go through the Somali government of Somalia. So that's why then the money was sitting in Somalia Central Bank, because the Somaliland have refused to accept any money that's channeled through the federal government of Somalia. So today, I do believe, considering what happened in Hargeisa, they could literally use these funds for either, getting enough firefighter trucks or helping folks who have lost, their money and also their businesses. A door that Somaliland, regardless of whatever, they claim, that the Somali government would still be able to help them. Okay. And funds like this should not be politicized.
Okay. Thank you for that, Abdirizak. Quays, Irbey, your take on Somaliland's developmental project funds being frozen. What jumps at you when you see the Prime Minister saying now that those funds will be released?
First of all, what we are seeing is a president who has divided the nation, every part of the nation, every part of whether it's the TFG or whether within, and has put a lot of problems throughout. Now, if you see that money is being frozen for a while, there is really no genuine single justification is why the money has been frozen in the first place. We have seen droughts that are flying around. We have seen people lost their livestock. We can see people are really dying because of there's no water. There is a president who's got the responsibility on his shoulders, but yet again he doesn't understand. Now, what happened is when you stop the funds that could have gone into some parts of Somalia that could have made the difference. What do you really expect? Do you really expect that part of the country to like you? Or are you trying to use that funds as a blackmailing and some kind of oppression? And if you are that sort of leader who is trying to get his way around by force and by blackmailing, by stopping and putting sanctions on some part of Somalia, can you really lead the nation? Can you be the president? Can you be the head of state of every part of Somalia? The answer is no. And I'm sorry to hear from my colleague in the discussion to say the least corrupted government is what we have right now. If we have a least corrupted president or least corrupted party that is leading Somalia right now, we wouldn't have seen the cut that's been cut and it's been stopped in Kenya, but yet again transferred into Ethiopia, and yet again the license has been given to Farmajo family. I mean, we are talking about £1 million income from the cut, the mirror a day that is going straight into the pocket of the president. That is a clear corruption. The second thing, what we are talking about here is, if you remember the last report from the Hantidor group or Hantidor leader, there is money that is being lost, millions and millions that is being lost. And even the embassies, the ambassadors named by this president are contributing to this problem and corruption. Why are we seeing things like this in the first time? Now, there's no justification, there's no answer to that. If you recall, when 2 years ago, when the budget has been, invited into the parliament to be discussed, we have had £47 million lost, and there is no clear calculations, there is no clear direction explained by the government, especially by the president, where this money is gone, how it's been spent, and where are we accounting that money into. Again, if this president or this government has no corruption, who is spending this money? Where has it gone to? I mean, the list can go on and on and on. But one thing I would like to mention is Prime Minister Roble is always taking bravery steps, bravery decisions. And if you remember, today, Farmajo has spoken to Mr. Bihi, the president of Somaliland. All he said is, I'm sorry to hear this. Yet again, he didn't have the courage to announce the release of these funds, which he initially stopped for no reason. And yet, again, the Prime Minister to release these funds, we are hearing the discussions throughout that says the president could object. And yet again, it's another disaster if that's what he chooses to do.
Thank you for that, guys. The Auditor General's report is out there for the public to view. But about the mirror allegations, we don't have.
Ricardo, if you might.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please. Number one, I do respect my brother's opinion, but here we do have numbers. It's not like, we would have to come up with rumors. The Auditor General's report is out there. Anyone can go and read it. The issue of the court, it's literally, I would consider it to be a cheap story. But what we do have right now in our own eyes is that we witnessed $9.6 million that was confiscated in 2018. And now we do see today, in 2022, 5 years later, another $11 million plus that was sitting in Central Bank of Somalia that were meant for Somaliland. So this is over $20 million. Literally, that could have been misused, misallocated, used for any other purposes. And number three, today, being the fifth year, almost the sixth year for Farmajo is in power, payments are getting, salaries are getting paid. And whether it's the civil servants, whether it's the army, whether it's the MPs, whereby the previous government, we witnessed that more than a year before even their term finished, like none of this were happening. So I would really ask my friend, next time, if we depend on numbers, I'm willing to do so. But if we are depending on basis of rumors, then everyone has their own shots to say whatever they want.
Right. The cat and mirror issue is also out there, that Ethiopia is actually importing cat into Somalia or mirror into Somalia. But the federal government did stop the cat business relations that Somalia had with Kenya. That's self-evident. Who is getting the tenure for those? That's public knowledge as well. People can look into it. But if I may pivot, because we could be here all day, if I may stay with you, Abdirizak.
And it's a Farmacho family, by the way. Farmacho family. Hassan Farmacho has the license from Ethiopia cut. And again, it's clear, but carry on. Apologies.
Brother, this is the only precedent that has not been tarnished, to be correct. Like we had other presidents who were either tarnished to be grabbing land, grabbing resources. But if you come with real, evidence that tarnishes Farmacho, then yeah, absolutely. But yes, let us go and move on.
It doesn't really, the personalities almost don't matter. We know, all of us know, the listeners and and our viewers know where Somalia ranks in these multiple issues that, unfortunately our country has. But if we may move on to the MB certifications that are underway currently, the elected MPs so far of the 11th Parliament of Somalia. Just like every step in that process, there's a dispute. Now, what are your thoughts, Abdirizak?
Number one, I think it's really great to have the process continue. The new MPs should get, the certificates, the IDs, because the sooner we finish this never-ending process of election, the better for Somalia and for everyone. So that's one thing I would literally say, let the process continue, let the new elected MPs get their IDs, and then get sworn. But also, I would literally say it's also very unfortunate that the Prime Minister's office and the fifth chairman, to target only Southwest and Fahad from Hirshabelle. We literally have seen what have happened in Bosaso. We have seen what happened in Kismayo, in Galkayo, in Beledweyne. I did not really see a reason why only Koonfur Galbeed, Southwest Somalia, and Fahad was singled out. And not only that, with Fahad, I do believe, Hirshabelle, as many other Somalis do believe, was one of the most past places that even elections had even an open, were open, whereby we had more than 5, 6, candidates for running for one seat. So, but again, I think the idea of, like creating a dispute to delay the process might not work for all of us. And the best way we can come over this is let the process continue, let the new elected MPs get sworn in, and then we would move in and elect a new president.
Right. Quays Irbey, your thoughts on the dispute over Fahad Yassin and other members of parliament not giving their certification after their election to their respective seats. Care to weigh in on that issue?
I mean, it's very clear that Fahad, as well as a number of other seats like Jawari's old seat and the Minister of Justice's ex-seat, has been corrupted by this, Fahad on his own seat, as well as Southwest. Now, if you look at the way FEED works, they have the power to tell you to stop the seat if they have a genuine, reasonable reason to do so. However, if you just ignore it and carry on like there's no government, like there's no process, like there's no FEED, then the consequences will come after you and bite you in the end. And that is what we are seeing happening to Fahad Yassin, as well as these above mentioned seats. Now, Fahad and Farmacho are into their last hopeless situation. Fahad cannot come and collect his certificate, and that's not going to happen because his seat is in dispute because of what we know. He cannot turn up into the parliament when the parliament reopens, and there's no way he can get the card or ID or whatever. The only options that are on the table right now for them is to really be open and transparent and cooperate about the dispute and submit their case, rather than acting, a bit cockiness, and I've been the most strong, most powerful individual for the last 5 years. That is not going to work, especially with Prime Minister Roble, who has right now got on his eyes correcting the problems that has been happening. Now, that tells us something. Formaggio decided, okay, you're not giving the certificate to Fahad and these other members, okay, Southwest MPs are not going to come and collect the certificates. What they then realized is the timetable will carry on and nobody is going to hold back for them. And again, that is another setback to them, because these MPs sat down yesterday in Baidabo with the president over there and said, listen, we're not going to stop, because if we don't get the certificate, what's the point of us being here? We're not going to be given the ID. We're not going to turn up into our cities in the MPs hall. So they have to let go. And that shows another sign that Formaggio regime is losing the war, is losing the fight right now, because these MPs have to turn up today, collected their certificates, collected their IDs. And the next step that we are seeing right now is those bullying tactics is no longer an option for them.
Thank you.
So they have to come up with some kind of other issues. People are talking about some kind of further explosions to take place, which they could be planning. It could be assassinations. It could be other issues. But if you recall the Hirshabelle, which my colleague has mentioned, it's the one region that had the most casualties, if you remember. Amino, MP Amino, it's being killed by what? By assassination. There's so many other explosions. Remember when the day that Fahad's supposed to turn up for his seat election, just a day before, or on the same day, I don't remember exactly, the massive explosion that has killed hundreds of people. I don't want to list all these negativities to the eyes of or the ears of the audiences, but it's just a few things that we can really highlight.
Right. I appreciate that, Abdirizak. As you know, and as we all know, the 16 seats in Garbaharey are still out there, and there are also other seats in the 11th Parliament that have not been elected yet. If you could, what does this mean for the Garbaharey elections? The fact that MPs are now getting their certificate, and it looks like, and we're slated to have the 11th Parliament be sworn in on the 16th of April.
If you may allow me to say a few things before moving to this question. And number one, if anyone is interested to have these elections, happen as soon as possible, that is Formaggio. And the reason I'm saying this is, whenever there are delays, that literally would bring him down for sure. So we do know that there were so many attempts to have this process delayed. And I do believe the reason why, very many MPs, some of them, against Formaggio's leadership, some of them pro-Formaggio were taking their certificates and getting their IDs, is to have the process continue. Believe me, the process to continue is good for everyone. So, and if Roble could literally finish the process of this election as soon as possible, we would truly be grateful to him. And that's all we wanted. But unfortunately, he always gets, sidetracked. Coming back to your question on 16, seats in ghetto. Again, I'm sorry to say this, but we live at a time where the prime minister, the presidential candidates, 99% of them, except for Formaggio, are not really saying anything about a whole region that have their MPs and not elected. No one is really even concerned. So it's very unfortunate that these leaders, who some of them are running to be president for Somalia, and some of them are stakeholders, politicians, and not into, like denying the rights that the people of ghetto have. Coming back to Roble, the prime minister, he himself went to Garbaharey, He have openly said Garbaharey is safe so that elections can happen. And he said we would even try to have Garbaharey to be the first place in all of the 11 constituencies elections to start with. But unfortunately, since after the difference between him and Formaggio have started, the prime minister could not differentiate between the two, between Formaggio and Ghetto. Now, we do see that the prime minister is not even interested for Ghetto elections to happen. The prime minister is more invested into doing an election where Ghetto and 16 seats are not part of it, assuming that they would vote for Formaggio. And it's really so, below the belt. A prime minister is the prime minister for all of Somalia. And if people of Ghetto do not vote or do not participate in this election, that would be a stain on him. And it would never, history books would be written on this. Like denying a whole region to vote and participate in election where the rest of Somalis are participating just because they are related to Farmajo. They're no different from the MPs elected from Galmudug, who have presidential candidates. They're not different from MPs elected from other states who have presidential candidates. So I don't really see why the prime minister could not differentiate between the two.
Quays, Irbey, the 16 seats in Garbaharey, and what problem would that cause for the process of the 11th Parliament to be sworn in on the deadline, April 16?
I don't think these 16 seats are going to cause a massive issue because there is already enough numbers of MPs that can really sit down and elect a president. But if you listen to my colleague here, he's mentioning that the prime minister is the one that is objecting these seats to be elected or an election to take place because of these 16 seats. What he's really not understanding is why there is this chaos in the first place. And the simple answer is because the president chose to say, okay, this is my tribe, this is my region, this is where I am from. Therefore, I'm taking this part of Jubaland out of the control of Jubaland state. Or
we don't remember hearing that
region.
from the president's mouth. But go ahead, make your point.
Please. That is my understanding, and that's everybody's understanding. It's well written, it's well known. Now, if you look at the Jubaland, the ghetto cities, who's supposed to decide where they should take place? It is the President Ahmed Madobe. That is simple answer. Is he allowed to do so? No. Why LWAC is not an option? Why another region is within the Jubaland are not an option? Why just the ghetto? Simple. Because the president is from there and president is holding to these seats. Now, if you look at the other areas, my colleague has mentioned Galmudug, he mentioned Hirshabelle, he mentioned other areas. Do you really think the seats like Abdirahman Abdishakur, Odawa, Mahat Salat, and other, influential, well-known individuals came from Galmudug, came because the president didn't like them? No, they came because they had the power to come out, because they had forces to bring their power out. Now, if you remember, even Abdirahman Abdishakur, which is the main opposition of Farmajo, has been attempted to totally eliminate his seat by saying, okay, this seat should go into the 30% of the women is called. How can that even happen? It has never been. That seat has never been into the women's seat. Anyway, the bottom line is this. The president will always try, one way or another, to stop the election to proceed. That, remember, number of times that has happened. Whether he will continue to do so now, we don't know, because the international community is putting every step to kind of pressure him. There is sanctions that is going to be announced very soon when the MPs are sworn and certificates as well as ID card issued to the MPs. We had to wait and see. But the president, as all we know, and he's been famous of objecting every progress the Somali, political deadlock to be eliminated and to, for us to move forward.
I appreciate that both of you it's the Garbaharey issue, Abdirizak, before you. Yeah, go ahead.
I think one thing I wanted to get it clear is that the conflict in Jubaland, particularly Kismayu and Ghetto, not really something that is started with Formaggio. And that is the biggest misconception. That's a lot of folks who are trying at least to take advantage of Formaggio's term used against Garbaharey's elections. The conflict has been there before Formaggio came to power. It was there during Hassan Sheikh Mohammed's tenure. It was there during Sharif's. It's been there as long as we can remember, or Jubaland even existed. Number two, President Madobe has been in power for over 11, 12 years. And he never visited Ghetto, particularly Garbaharey, which is the capital city of Ghetto. And that region has been, liberated from Al-Shabaab back in 2009, 2010. So it's been even like, we don't even know why. And then number three, Ahmed has spent more time in Nairobi. He had traveled to Nairobi more than he traveled to all of Somalia's cities combined, including Mogadishu and Garbaharey. So it's really very unfortunate for the Somali leaders, especially Prime Minister Roble and the presidential candidates, the majority of them who are also from the same constituents from Mr. Roble, to politicize the election in Garbaharey. This has nothing to do with Formaggio. The election, the 16 seats in Garbaharey would be there even after Formaggio leaves, was there before Formaggio. So it would be an stain on them to deny the rights for those people just because they related to Formaggio. And I think it is not really something good that the rest of the Somalis continue with the process of electing a new president without the input of people of Ghetto. If that happens, I would honestly not be surprised if Ghetto becomes another Somaliland and declare themselves as independent from Somalia, since they're not part of the Somali government or the Somali new elected MPs. Because what makes them to be part of Somalia if they're not part of the MPs? Thank you.
Thank you, Quays. Quickly, you, and then we'll conclude that this week.
The number one thing here is my colleague is really not taking into the account that, yes, the Ghetto and the Jubaland situation has always been there, whether Formaggio was here or not, but elections used to take place. That's the difference. Right now, elections is not taking place because Formaggio is objecting to it. And that is a really real point that, we cannot have a blind eye on it. Now, the second thing here is, if they decide to declare themselves independent from Somalia, where are they going to go? They are the most affected drought is region in Somalia. They are not part of Jubaland. I mean, they are part of the Jubaland land-wise and administration-wise, but they are not taking instructions and orders from the government there. So the problem that we really need to see here is Formaggio came in and targeted that region and said, okay, I'm going to secure the border to begin with. Have taken a lot of armies. If you remember back and forth, airplanes with a lot of armies have always been, offloaded into there from Mogadishu and then brought back. If you remember the Minister of Defense in Jubaland, Formaggio has finally made a deal with him, although they have been acting all the time being in conflict. And right now, what we are looking for is a stable government that moves forward. And my colleague and I are in one agreement for one thing: there will be new president, and there will be no Formaggio back. And he said it in his own words a number of times: we need to elect a new president. Yes, we need to elect a new president, but the president who is in the office has taken an extension unfairly, unjustified for 2 years, does not want a new president to come. So that's the issue.
Appreciate that. Thank you immensely for the both of you. I think there's a couple of things that we can agree to disagree here and perhaps further discuss on other occasions. But I applaud you for joining us and letting us know exactly how you feel about the issues. Thank you so much.